Fish Baby Daddy here talking about substrate in your fish tank and just want to see what the pros and cons of having different types of substrates are. So let's get to it. There's a lot of different types of substrates. One I'm showing you here right now is a pool filter sand. The pool filter sand I like using a lot because it actually is light. It has the ability to actually not clump down so much, and it's not real heavy on the tank itself. And it has the ability to actually capture a lot of beneficial bacteria. This is something a lot of times people don't talk about when it comes to substrates. But this substrate itself, actually, you can stir it up a little bit and you can maybe siphon a little bit of the detritus out with a hose on top of the sand, and that's pretty much all you'd have to do. Any other dirt that would actually be in the sand, the bacteria that actually builds up in the sand would do a really good job of actually just gobbling it all up. So in some ways, this pool filter sand acts as a great it kind of cleans itself up on its own and does its own maintenance. So I really like the pool filter sand from that regard. It acts as a great bed for bacteria, and it kind of does a self-cleaning. And so I think it's very beneficial. I think a lot of people get caught up in sand and they're worried because it's not going to, they're not sure how to clean it because the normal typical gravel, they'll use a gravel vac and they'll actually try to pull out the detritus and the dirt. And a lot of times what happens with people when they're actually doing with the sand, they try to mimic that same thing. They end up siphoning all the sand out of the tank. And all you have to do is just lightly take the siphon or a hose or anything and just gently put it on top of the actual sand, not in the sand itself, and it will actually take out any excess dirt. Again, any other dirt that's in the sand itself will kind of be gobbled up by the bacteria and acts as a self-cleaning mechanism in a way. So I really enjoy the pool filter sand. It does a really good job and it looks really natural too. Some other benefits that I like with the pool filter sand is that it actually helps kind of keep the fish calm and gets them to relax and makes it feel like they're in their natural state. These leopard frog plecos really enjoy actually being in the substrate and digging around, and what it does is it kind of keeps them calm and makes them feel more comfortable that they are in a natural environment. So the sand itself is very beneficial from that regard. In this tank here, I have Gymnogeophagus balzani, which is a sand sifter. And so what will happen is that they will actually dig into the sand because that's kind of like their natural instinct. And so without having that sand, they're going to feel like out of place and probably be a little more stressed. So the sand itself, it's good for the biological bacteria. It kind of is a self-cleaning in some ways. I mean, you have to clean it a little bit, but it also actually helps with the natural environment with a lot of particular fish that instinctively want to actually dig into the sand. They want to actually take whether it's part of their mouth or they have a sifting mechanism where they want to actually sift through it because it helps them reduce stress and actually make them feel like they're more at home. So there's a lot more benefits to it, but I really enjoy the pool filter sand from that regard. If you look at this tank, you would think I have a lot of substrate or any kind of substrate in here, and in fact I don't. I don't have any substrate in this tank. And so what I have to do is I have to count for, I have a lot of anubias that are on rock or wood, and I have so much of it, you can't even tell that I don't have a substrate. But if I don't have a substrate, I know that I don't have enough biological media or bacteria potentially, so I have to be very self-conscious of making sure that I have enough filters in the back of the tank, whether it's a canister filter or a hang on the back that has a lot of sponges that can absorb and colonize a lot of bacteria. So you want to be able to make sure that if you are going to go bare bottom, you got to make sure that you're going to have enough filtration or enough bacteria somewhere else to counter that. Now you can see in this tank clearly I do not have any substrate in here. And so I have to be real careful on actually placing rocks on the bottom on the glass, because I put rocks down there and they can act as pressure points, and I have to be careful on actually placing those and making sure they don't fall and crack the glass too. So you have to be very vigilant of that and making sure that, again, you have enough media, enough filtration that's going to help counter some of that lack of surface area that you would normally have with a substrate. But not having substrate is possible. And to the left of this, I have a wave maker that goes from left to right, and it kind of helps as a self-cleaning mechanism here. You can see I got a Severin that's a little bit bigger in here, and I have a Royal Pleco in here, and they respond a little bit better to current. So I wanted to actually, the Severin not so much, but the actual Royal Pleco likes current. So it's at the bottom, and it's on this. It just goes left to right, and so I didn't want to put too much sand in here or anything because I felt like it was gonna kind of interfere with the substrate or the disturbance of the substrate. So it's worked for me. It's possible, but I want to just keep in mind that you make sure you have enough filtration if you're going to go bare bottom, and make sure you have something where you're going to place the rocks really, really soft, and you're not going to prevent from any rocks dropping on the glass, because if that rock drops on that glass, it could crack. So you got to be careful of that too. I wanted to mention too, with like planted tanks, I think fluorite is a great substrate I've used in the past. It's a clay based, has a lot of iron in it, a lot of root structure will get in there, and it will actually just take off really good. Another one that's kind of the opposite in terms of texture is a flue ball stratum. It's a little bit lighter. It's got some balls like in the substrate, and that actually creates a lot of surface area for beneficial bacteria to build up. But the ball texture of that actual substrate does a great job of like letting roots kind of navigate through. So those are other substrates I would recommend besides the pool filter sand, depending on what you're trying to do. And actually, if you're trying to go more planted tanks, you can see the one behind me with no substrate. But I got two big hang on the back filters on the back of that to counter that. And so I have an AquaClear 110 with a bunch of biological media in it. And then I have another AquaClear 70, I think, and I have a lot of like filter floss and stuff in there with a biological bag, a bio bag in there too to help with more media for beneficial bacteria. So I think it's real important to know that there's more ways than skin a cat, but I think there's you want to learn the benefits of that. I think on the flip side of that, you want to think about what is really bad substrate. And what's really bad substrate, in my opinion, is you start getting into really thick gravel. Thick gravel that you get in an aquarium store, and let's say you're getting into like 2-3 inches of gravel. This could be a huge problem, because what it's going to do is it's going to collect a lot of detritus, a lot of dirt, and it's just going to sit in there. It's going to sit in there. It's going to actually potentially create disease. It's going to lower pH to dangerous levels, and it'll become toxic or even septic to the fish. And you'll try to siphon as much as you can to get some of that gravel, the dirt out of that gravel, and if that gravel is too thick, you're not going to be able to get it all out. And it's going to take a lot of time, and it's cumbersome, and a lot of people are just in neglect from doing it. And it's going to result into a lot of problems, whether it's either disease, pH drop, and stress, a lot of different things that could go wrong that's going to create problems for your fish tank. So I would really refrain from getting any really thick gravel. And the other thing that comes to mind that I think about is a lot of people get a lot of like thicker rock pebbles, and they use that as a substrate, and that's a total disaster, I think, because that will accumulate a lot of waste and a lot of detritus and a lot of different things that will get in there, and it'll be really difficult to actually siphon that out and clean it on a regular basis. And it leads to, again, pH problems. It leads to disease maintenance problems. And so to really try to avoid getting like that thicker gravel and bigger rock gravel, because it's just going to lead to more problems. And if you're going with a planted tank, I would definitely go with flue ball stratum or a fluorite substrate. And when I think of anything else, when I'm thinking about fish that like to filter through the sand, or navigate through the sand a little bit, dig into the sand, I like the pool filter sand because it's lighter. It's a lot, it has that nice bed of beneficial bacteria that has the ability to actually gobble up a lot of any excess waste. And you just got to get used to actually just having like a skill, maybe somewhat of some sort, to actually make sure when you're siphoning, you're not siphoning all that sand out. You're just trying to get that stuff that's on the surface. And once you kind of understand that, you can stir up the sand when the filter's off, let it settle, and then you'll see that dirt actually sit on top of the sand. That's the stuff you're going to want to collect and get rid of. So those are really the benefits I think of when I think of looking at substrates and going with no substrate. And then thinking about how much, if you got, a gravel going too thick, what are the pros and cons of that? And I don't see any pros. So you want to think about that. And I'm speaking from experience because I've done it. I've done the thick gravel thing, and I couldn't figure out why my African cichlids were struggling so bad. And so, think about that and try to reduce getting any thick rocks in your gravel, because those thick rocks are going to lead to a lot of problems too. So the biggest thing is that whatever you're doing when it comes to substrate, you want it to work to your advantage. You want it to work for you. You don't want it to work against you. And so if you're going with no substrate, again, make sure you got a lot of filters. You got a lot of biological media on sponges. And then if you're going to go, with the sand, just know that, it can work for you, and it can actually act as a nice beneficial bacteria bed for you. And it can be somewhat low maintenance if you can actually just make sure there isn't too much overfeeding and there isn't too much detritus that's actually sitting on top of that sand, and you get comfortable with actually removing it. So you can see in this tank, it's bare bottoms, but I have a big sponge filter back there, and that sponge filter is for equivalent up to like 60 gallons. This is only a 20-gallon tank, a 20-gallon high. Maybe eventually I'll go to sand, but you can see that I'm actually drifting towards more. Here's that pool filter sand, this 10-gallon. I got in that 20-gallon. Another 10-gallon over there for my grow outs. My grow out tank's there. You can see it. I'm actually going, there we go. There's a 10-gallon grow out, 20-gallon grow out long. No substrate in there. Have to have substrate in here just because of those Gymnogeophagus balzanis. They love it. Love having it in this plant tank, because I'm trying to get some fry going. They can actually dig through the sand a little bit, and they're going to have some babies, so it's inevitable that they're going to feel more comfortable in that. Same thing goes in here when I'm breeding. When I'm going through these leopard frog plecos, I want them digging through the sand because that's how they feel comfortable in the wild. And then here I'm actually trying to get some breeding going in here. So you can see them, they're already kind of digging through the sand. They like hanging out, going through it. And then I'm with the fry swimming in and out of it as well. So even behind me, you can see that I have no substrate in that. So I have a plethora of either like pool filter sand, or I have no substrate. And so I just kind of wanted to give you a perspective on there's different ways to do it. And I wanted to actually talk about substrate itself, because I feel like a lot of times people want to actually use something, but they're not sure what to use or how to use it, when to use it. So there it is for substrate. Hopefully it was a good video for you. And until next time, Fish Baby Daddy.